All right, over to you, Taiob.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. Before I start, I really want to thank the organizers, for this opportunity. Also, the sponsor for tonight, Blue Cross Blue Shield, the local office there. Hopefully, you folks can check out, if their technical positions, um, because this is not easy, right? After a whole work of day, and you came to listen to me. Hopefully, you can make a good use of this time, and especially the pandemic. For me, at least, things made a little bit stressful. With 3 children at home. Um, and it's a school, it's an office room, playground, and all that. So I do appreciate that, all of you joining. So we will be talking about, I know Azure has multiple flavor of SQL, but we'll be mainly talking about, or primarily talking about, Azure SQL, which is a PaaS solution. I'm not talking about SQL Server on Azure VM or managed instance or hyperscale. So this presentation is totally on the PaaS service Azure SQL database, and how do you set up your high availability and disaster. During disaster, what do you do? So let's move on. I'm not going to read this slide, so I just want you to take a note of on the left side my contacts, in case if we do not get time or if you have any question later on. Please reach out to me. You should be able to download all my slide and demo code. Also, this is being recorded, so if you come into any doubt, any question, please reach out to me. So take a note of my contacts. I'll post those at the end again. So also, some of this might be in the meeting page. So why should you listen to me tonight or this evening? So this is a true story. It happened in UK region, UK South, 2019. And I'm not going to go into details, just to give you an example. Bunch of services were down for almost 16 hours in that region. And so the question for you, or if you are, planning to move to cloud, you're already in cloud, you are using Azure SQL database, can your business afford this downtime? Can you tell your business that no, you cannot have these databases available for 16 hours? And I hope that you already have some agreement with business about the expectation, and we'll touch on that a little bit. And it's not just a verbal agreement. I would urge you, if you're a team lead, if you're a tech lead, please talk to them and get it in writing, right? If you have someone who is, triaging all your emergencies, make sure they are on board, make sure they know, make sure your dev leads know, make sure your business partners, system owners, you are all on the same page on this. And when I say on this, I definitely mean this, RPO and RTO. And again, I'm not going to beat this to death. Most of you, if you should know this. And if you do not know, please look it up, right? And these are the two things that I want you to make sure that all of you in your company, all the stakeholders are on the same page and it's documented. There shouldn't be any ambiguity when you really have a disaster, right? Like we were talking about the Azure AD outage a few days ago, right? Those are the situations that you do not have any control if it's in all the region, right? But if it's in one region, then your business stakeholders should have a clear understanding that within how many hours you are supposed to bring up the databases in a different region and how much data you might lose, right? So you should have that clear understanding. So there's another term that's floating around that I want you to take note, is called ERT. And when we are on premises, I was not familiar with this term, but this has been floating around for last couple of years, mostly around cloud area. And this is really nothing but a max ERT is your RTO. And why this new term we are putting in? So I'll show you a couple of solutions today that you can implement, but each one has different numbers for your RPO, RTO, right? And I want to make sure that, or you want to make sure you have absolutely clear understanding that what solution you are putting and what you are getting into, right? Give you a quick example. If you just rely on the backup, the built-in backup solution, and the long-term backup and the point-in-time backup, and if you say, okay, that's all I want to, and my app can, will recover from a backup, right? Now, if a whole region is out, look at the RPO, RTO that Microsoft promised, right? They said it might take you 12 hours to restore in a different region. So does your business know about it? Did you tell them, hey, because they might say, I want to go, save money. I'm happy with backup. Then you need to make it clear, give them a reference, say, hey, you might have to wait for 12 hours before we can bring your database up in the secondary region or on a different region, right? If they say no, that's not acceptable, then you show them other solutions, and we'll talk most of those. So that's why this term is, and you might have two solutions. Like in my case, I have all kind of solutions, right? I mean, I have backups set. I have a point-in-time backup. I also have long-term retention backup because I work in a financial industry. We have a regulatory requirement. But on some of the databases, I also have geo-replication. And some of them also have failover groups, right? So for me, I have different RTO depending on which one I activate based on, what is the urgency. So just make sure you are clear on those things. Knowing all the technology and doing it is okay, but you also have to cover the business side. So I just wanted to make a point before we dive, deep into this. This is another slide. If you're new to RPO, RTO, I just put a visual slide just so people can comprehend what I'm talking about. And I put some notes. I'm not going to read those now. There can be a debate about the orange line, right? Because most of the time, as soon as the disaster happens, you are aware of it, right? And you'll get onto it. But there can be situations that you even do not know, right? What happened that someone deleted some rows by mistake and you only came to know maybe after 12 hours, right? Is that possible? It's possible in some cases, right? If that table was not being used actively, probably nobody would know, right? And suddenly, somebody's looking for that data and they're getting an error message, or they're not getting the data they want. Now they report it to you and you found out that, this happened. So there can be a time difference between the disaster happening and a request for recovery. And, does that go into RTO? You can debate about it, but I just want to make it clear that, people might have different opinion around it. That's why I put that, should this be part of RTO, right? You can also argue other way that, no, it's not part of the RTO because I didn't know that there was a disaster. My request came later on, so I should start counting from the minute that I got the request. And in some cases, that's true, right? I mean, if the example I just gave, someone deleted a table or deleted some data, you didn't know. Now the restore request came at the end of the orange line. Now your 12-hour period is start from that point, right? So some other stuff, again, I'm trying to build up the case. So these are a couple of purchase model. You have DTU and vCore, and then you have service tier, you have compute tier, and hardware type. I'm not going to read all this, and I do not want you to memorize all this because these are all available into Microsoft documentation. The reason this is important, if you're building a new app or if you're talking to people that, what's your RPO, RTO, what's the expectation, and then next, you probably want to talk to what kind of server you want, right, or what kind of database you want. Now, the reason you need to know that all of these different options does not provide all the HADR options that I'm going to show you. A quick example, point-in-time backup, you can slide it up to 35 days. By default, you get 7 days. If you're in basic tier, you cannot go to 35 days. So now your business wants 35 days point in time, and they also want to go with the basic tier to save money. You have to tell them, no, it's just not possible. You don't have that option. You cannot have both. If you want to go, you have to minimum go to standard, and then I can give you up to 35 days. That is the reason that we need to know all this. And again, you don't need to memorize. You can always go to books online. There are tables. You can just refer to them or send your business partners, those links. So just be aware before you decide your HADR, you also want to be aware of what you are deploying. Some of these will depend on that. So because I mentioned DTU and vCore, I just want to touch base. If some of you don't know, if some of you just started your Azure journey, I do not want to use a term that, that I didn't give you a little bit more details. So Microsoft recommendation right now is what you see on the right side of this slide to go with the vCore model. Initially, Azure SQL Database was released with just DTU model, a few years ago. And with the DTU model, you really do not have a control of how much CPU and how much memory you get. These are these are all bundled together. So they call this database transaction unit. Whereas when you go to the vCore model, now you can independently scale your compute, storage, and I/O. So you have control all three separately. Whereas with the DTU, you do not have that. Again, Microsoft's highly recommend that you should go to the vCore model. Don't use DTU model anymore, but it's available if you want to use it. Especially if you're testing it like just by yourself. If you say like you have a Visual Studio subscription, you get some money every month. DTU model basic pretty good. It's $5 a month. You can have one Azure SQL database running for the whole month. So, but again, before you go to production, that's Microsoft's recommendation. So these are a couple of things that we'll be talking about tonight. Now, some of you probably scratching your head that why I have temporal table here, right? It's temporal table is the HADR solution, no way, right? And Microsoft even, I just want to make it clear, it's not a HADR solution officially, that Microsoft will never admit to that, right? But, and I'm not going to even talk about it into details. This is same concept as on-premises. So if you're familiar with temporal table, if someone made a change by mistake, you need to get to the older value. Some of this is stuff you can recover if you have the temporal table turned on. That's the only reason I'm mentioning this. I'm not going to talk in detail about this. Again, if you are using temporal table, I also want you to be aware of what I said before. What tier you are in. There is some limitations in between the tiers, especially with the column store indexes. There are only certain tiers have that available. Every tier doesn't have it, and also enable you for the restore of the raw versions from any point in time. Also, there is a limitation on certain tiers. I don't memorize those, but if you are deploying this, please look it up. And then the rest, I'm not going to read this. Let's dive in, and we'll go through one by one. So this is one of the chart that I was talking to you before. So before you deploy a solution, this is a chart that you can use or you can refer to. I also put a URL at the bottom where I copied this from, and there are more details into that URL, right? So again, I'm not going to read this like I was giving you an example. If you just rely on the backup, your RTO is 12 hour, your RPO is 1 hour. Is business okay with it? No. Then go to the next one. Auto failover groups. Are you okay with 1 hour and 5 seconds? No, I'm not okay. Then tell them okay. You have to go, you go to the manual database failover with active geo replication, and then you can get 30-second and 5-second. Now, active failover groups actually built on top of active geo replication. I'll talk more about it, and I'll also give you a consolidated chart in one view. What is the difference between auto failover groups and geo replication? So Microsoft initially actually released just active geo replication. Auto failover group came later. And auto failover group, if you are on premises, if you are used to always on availability group, it's the same concept. So if I have a couple of databases that it's supporting an application, I can fail them at the same time, so they're transitionally consistent. I can do that. With active geo replication, I cannot do that. Active geo replication is per single database, and that was a problem that customers complained. So Microsoft listened. Now you can do it in a group, but once you do that, then you get other restrictions, right? How many copies you get and all that, and we'll talk about those. Automated backup. So you do not have to set up backup, and you cannot even set up if you want to for Azure SQL databases. You can configure from the given menu what you want. There are two different types: point in time, long-term retention. How long you want to keep it, you can set that up. We'll see the chart. But the point you need to remember, and if you read my first bullet, it says lose control of precise RPO. And why do I say that, right? When I'm in the on-premises, if I'm taking a backup using SQL Server Agent, and you probably use some other, third-party tools, appliances, and whatnot, you can schedule this up to the second, right? I can say my transaction log is going to happen every 3 minutes, 20 seconds. I have that precise control. With Azure SQL Database, you do not have that control. And if you read the Microsoft documentation, I kind of highlighted a little bit. The exact timing will depend based on your workload and the size of the databases and how much transaction log you are generating and all that. So you cannot have that precise control, just so you know. This is again something you probably want to discuss when you talk about point-in-time recovery with your counterparts. Normally, full is going to happen as soon as you deploy database, and from there, every week. Differential, again, if you see that it's star sign I put, not precise, right? It says between 12 and 24 hours. Transaction log between 5 and 10 minutes. So these are the couple of things you probably want to educate your folks, especially, the people, they are not really, hands on the keyboard with the databases. You want to make it clear, hey, we are moving to cloud, all good, but these are a couple of things that are different than when we are on premises. I already talked about this briefly, that point in time, you get 7 days, except basic tier. Any other tier, you can slide it up to 35 days. Long-term retention, again, you do not have to set it up. You can go up to 10 years. And they, by default, they are already geo-redundant. So you do not have to do anything. If something goes wrong, you can spin up a server, takes a minute, and then you can start restoring in a different region. I'm not going to read this chart. So when you set up long-term retention, you have a bunch of options. Look it up. You can set up weekly. Say, I want to keep my weeklies for this long. I want to keep my monthly backup for this long, and I want to keep my yearly. Now, what's a yearly backup, right? What's the definition of a yearly backup, right? The definition of a yearly backup in this case is actually based on the week. So you can say every year, the 4th week backup, keep it for 10 years. Or you have to mention which week you want to keep for 10 years. There's not anything per se like this is my yearly backup. It's one of the weekly backup you have to choose. And then you tell it for how many years you want to keep it. This is a question I get, of course, how do you restore, right? And same as on premises, you can restore with the same name. So if they ask you to restore, the first question you ask, can I rename the existing one, right? So like something happened, they said, hey, can we, or restore with a different name? And then once they're comfortable, you can swap the name. It's obvious, like even on premises, you cannot have a, 2 databases with the same name, and same is there. As I said, you can do it in the same logical server. You can spin up a brand new server. You can spin up one in the different region. It's all up to you. You can do that. If you delete a database today, and this database was there for 35 days, means you have your backup for another, whatever your retention is, you can restore. Problem is, if you delete a SQL server, you cannot restore a database. So for the point in time. So that's something you want to keep in mind, right? Once you delete a database, you cannot restore those databases. Once you delete a server, sorry. But if you delete a database, you can do that. So this is a thing I think they're going to change pretty soon. I think they just need to do some code change, but there's a lot of talk around it to fix this. I get this question always. But I'm not going to talk about on-premises. That can I restore my Azure SQL database on-premises? You cannot just take a backup from cloud, the backups that we've been talking about, and restore. But there are other ways you can do it, and I'm not going to go into details. There are a bunch of tools that I listed, as you can see in the slide. All these tools can do the work, but it's not a straightforward click a button of a restore. You have to do some work, right? Read about this, and if you need more details, please let me know. I can give you a little bit more details on those. Now, built-in HDR. So as soon as you deploy a Azure SQL database, you get some redundancy. And what do I mean by that? So, and now here again, we are forking into 2 different things. If you look at the top, it's for basic, standard, general purpose, is done differently compared to premium and business critical. And when I do the demo, you will see that the basic, standard, general purpose in my demo, in my workstation, in my laptop, it happens a lot earlier, but by the time I get the acknowledgement, it's 30+ seconds. Whereas in the premium and business critical, it's 1/3 of that time. And why is that happen, right? If you look at this picture, you actually get only one set of data and log file, and your storage get attached to this. So this is if I have to give you an example, like failover cluster instance of on-premises, right? You have shared storage, but you have two compute, right? Or two or three compute in a failover cluster instance scenario. And then you have your backup files, which automatically get replicated. So with the built-in, you really do not have to do anything. You will see a timeout, and I'll show you this in a demo. You will start getting timeout, and your app should automatically reconnect if you have the retry logic built in. So you automatically get get 3 more nodes, and but you do not get it's just a single copy of storage, just so you know. And now if we go to premium and business critical, this is similar to what you get today always on availability group, right? Every compute has its own data and log files, so it's not sharing that. So even your storage has redundancy. And backup is same. You have one copy, it's geo-redundant. So out of this, if you're on a business premium or business critical, you can actually use some of these extra nodes for your read-only traffic without paying any extra money. And I'll show you that a couple of things in the demo when you go there. With this, one of the node is always in sync, so you do not get your commit till the data got replicated at least to one of the node out of the 3. So you have to wait for that. And these are all, you do not do anything. You just spin up your single database, you get all this behind the scene. We do not have to do anything. So this is, we are talking about redundancy within the data center. And the way the Azure is built, if you you have this region, but within a region you have multiple data centers. And there's also zone, and a zone can have 1 or more data centers. Now, if you want a zone redundancy, not a region redundancy, there's also some options for you. And it doesn't matter what tier you go to, for every tier, zone redundancy is disabled by default. The reason it's disabled by default, as soon as you turn on zone redundancy, means all your replicas needs to be in sync, means you have to have synchronous replication. And as soon as you turn on synchronous replication, means your apps cannot get acknowledgement back till your logs get hardened to the other nodes. So you might see a little bit latency for your apps from getting the acknowledgement. So keep that in mind, right? So you're turning this on, but you need to test it for yourself, right? So in a region, if you have 3 zones, just for an example, what does that mean? That means that each zone has its own power, cooling, network and all that. So if the whole zone goes down, you'll be automatically redirected to a different zone. Now, how does Microsoft do that? Again, there's a difference. If you're in a general purpose, which is in public preview today, it will cost you extra money. And again, it's disabled by default. Now, as you see here, you have this zone 1, 2, 3 divided into 3 different tower, which everyone has its own, like I said, power, cooling, and network. But you still have one set of data and log files. So you're only getting compute there, but they will all point to the same storage, and you still have your backup there, right? And go back to the, refer to the, the slide that I show first, that even what type of hardware you choose, it matters, because this is only available today with the Gen 5. So if you are getting other type of hardware, the like M series and others, you cannot get this. So make sure, you tie all these things together before you deploy. If you're in premium and business critical, you are not paying extra money. You get this by default. Again, it is disabled, only available for Gen 5. As soon as you turn this on, I highlighted this, right? Your network latency might increase for your commit time, because now logs needs to be hardened for all other zone. within that region. So probably we'll take a pause. If any questions at this point, or
I don't see anything in the chat.
okay, sure, I'll move on. So Active Geo Replication, this is the same, pretty much same code that today we use on premises for always on availability group. Same concept. Your logs will be copied and then hardened, and they'll be replayed, right, into the secondary. Now this is asynchronous, just so you know. This is not synchronous. That's why when you saw the RPO RTO, there is a 30-second and a 5-second because of this. Because you might lose your primary before your logs got hardened. Transaction logs get hardened into your secondaries. So just keep that in mind. You get up to 4 secondaries. Again, it's same as business critical tier. You can use these secondaries for your read-only traffic. Now, they can be a little bit behind. And one thing you need to understand that people get confused sometimes. They look at the 5-second, right? And people think that I should get data up to the 5 seconds, right? But that's not the case. If you think about it a little bit more, the SLA is for how much data you can lose. So the guarantee is that your logs will be hardened within the 5 seconds, but it's not a guarantee that your logs has been replayed, right? So you have to keep that in mind. So you might not be seeing, you might see the data like, okay, why I'm seeing a data that's 2 minutes older, right? Because your logs are there. It got hardened, but it hadn't been replayed into your secondary and got into your database. So just keep that in mind. Your guarantees that you're not going to lose data, but Microsoft is not guaranteeing that your data is always up to date up to the 5-second for in your secondary. So there's a distinction. So just keep that in mind. Sometimes people do get confused and they ask me a question like, hey, because if you have a heavy work, Microsoft do a good job and you can easily simulate this, get a small Azure SQL database, run some OSTress. It's a tool that you can mimic workload with, say, like 10 hosts with multiple threads. You will see that your and there is a performance counters that you can look. Your log generation will be capped to 100%. So Microsoft pretty much throttle you at the primary to keep that SLA. But I still want to mention that people will get confused with that 5-second, that's for log hardening, not for replay of your logs. If you do have a transaction that you want to make sure that it made to the secondary before your customers get acknowledgement, or you say, I really cannot afford to lose this transaction, no way. Look this up. You can use this within your transaction. The acknowledgement will wait till it goes to the secondary. So again, the guarantees it's got replicated but not replayed. I just want to make that clear. So look this up if you have some critical transactions that you definitely want to make sure that it made to the secondary. So auto failover group was built on what I just showed you, the active geo replication. With active geo replication, I showed you that you can get up to 4 secondaries, but with auto failover group, you cannot have that. You can only get 1 secondary. And other good part is you get listener endpoints. So if you use these built-in endpoints that you get, you do not have to change your connection string in case if you fail over. So the endpoints will route you to the right server, and I'll show you those. You can use the secondary for read-only traffic. The secondary or the read-only node doesn't have automatic failover. They don't, because most of the time, if your primary go down, now you move to the secondary, it doesn't make sense to fail over the secondary to the primary because you failed over because there is issue in the primary. So just be aware of that. Now, the name says that it's an auto failover, right? I will talk about this a little bit more. This is also available in every tier. other than hyperscale. And I think I missed the active geo-replication is available in every tier, and failover group every tier except hyperscale. These are the endpoints that I was talking about. So, and I'll show you this. So as soon as you create a failover group, you get this too. So you take those two strings and use this as your connection string. So when you fail over, you do not have to worry about your connection string. It will take care of it automatically. Now, when you set up failover group, you will see this term grace period with data loss hours. In last few weeks, I actually worked with two of the PMs at Microsoft. One of them I worked with him many years ago, Dimitri, and this has a lot of confusion. So, I suggested a couple of fixes into the documentation, and they're doing it. And I normally don't try to promote my blog post when I'm giving a talk, but this one I actually put my thoughts together because I got a few questions even within my company. So this is a URL. When you get the slide, if you click that, it will take you to my blog post. Read about this. So in summary, and this value, the reason I got a lot of questions about this value, the minimum value you can put is a 1 hour. So what does that mean? That Microsoft will fail you over after 1 hour. Now, you might be in a business that you cannot afford that 1 hour, right? Your business holders, stakeholders might want to do a failover before. So what do you do in that case, right? So you can go and do a manual failover. But if you set this up, you want to be aware that what it is and what it is not. That's why I just want to point that out. So the next slide, because I talked about auto failover groups and geo-replication. So this is a chart that tells you pretty much, at a high level, what are the differences between these two. So if you set this up, just be aware what you are getting into and what you are getting with this. Another question I get a lot of time is how far behind I am, right? How do I monitor? Like on premises, we can monitor our always on availability group, right? How far behind we are, right? How far behind the secondary is. If I have emergency, the question I get asked a lot is the secondary close to the primary, right? If we fail over right now, how much data are we going to lose? In cloud, this is I pretty much copied from books online. I added one more column. And when I was looking at auto failover groups and I was doing some testing, also I found out if you see the third column, last replication, the documentation is wrong. Today, if you go to books online, and if you run this and you look at the column descriptions, and then you run this, it will not make sense to you. It shows that the primary is behind the secondary. So I also flagged that I could not fix the documentation because I need to get the right word from them, exactly what it means. So hopefully, I'm working with Dimitri, hopefully this will get fixed. So just keep that in mind. The third column, that last application, it actually giving a wrong description on the documentation as of today. So that's it. I do not have any other slide. We'll go to demo. And before I go there, I put bunch of resources here. If you want to read more, these are all URLs, mostly to Microsoft documentation. And if you want to download, if you have a cell phone, you want to take this, you can download my slide and all the code, right? This will take you to my GitHub repo, and you should be able to download. And I can also send the link later on to the organizers so they can post it. I have no reservation you downloading and play with it. So give me a second. Let me switch to the demo. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm just going to switch my screen for a minute. This will be a good time if anyone wants to ask me any question. If you don't want to speak up, you can put in the chat. Okay, hopefully you see my Azure Data Studio. So, yes. Great.
There's a question in the chat.
Okay, let me look it up. Okay. inherited and SQL database that was created as standard 100 DTU OT vCore. It's been working fine during our beta, but should I switch it? No, if it's working for you, oh, sorry, not vCore, right? There are some calculators. How do you compare with the DTU and vCore? If you want to switch it, you can switch, but if it's working for you with other features, I see no reason, right? If your backups, your HADR solutions, if people are happy with it, they're happy with the price. Price is always a point because I work for a small company. If those are working, I wouldn't switch it, right? I mean, Microsoft can recommend, but if it's serving my purpose, if I don't see any issue, I don't want to. But also, again, scaling up is a easy task if you want to do that, right? But if nothing is bothering you, why you do that, right? So before all of you came online, because I do not expect you to, watch this, so I created a bunch of resources, right? And this is already in my GitHub. If you do not know, I'm using Azure Data Studio and a notebook. If you are not familiar with notebook, it's a pretty much code, comments, results, hyperlinks all in one place, right? You could have run this in any PowerShell tools that you use. It'll be perfectly fine. So, but I use this way so you can read about it. And I can even save the result set and send it to someone. So I'll show you. So I'm not going to read through this. I put enough comment, so you should be able to. And they're all variable driven. So if you don't like my names that I put, and there are a couple of things that, of course, you have to change, like your subscription ID and stuff. But here you can put all your variables, right? If you have, your naming convention and whatnot, and then the rest of the script should work, right, for you. So it's everything taken from there, so I don't have to switch it all the time. So I said demo starts here, right? So what did I do with those scripts, right? Because, just want to make sure I show you this. So I basically created 3 Azure SQL Server, the logical server, that it even doesn't cost me anything. And I created 2 databases, right? One is under the primary server, and I have a secondary server that I'm going to use as a geo replication. It's in central US, and my primary is in East US. I also created another server called Rediscal Out, and this is in East US because I want to show you that, how, without doing anything, how do you get the Rediscal capability, right? How can you read from it without spending any extra money? So that's all I set up so far. So let's move on. So first one, we're looking at a long-term retention, right? So what do we get by default, right? Without doing anything. So I just created those databases from the script. I didn't do anything. As you can see here, we do not get any long-term retention by default, right? Everything is 0. And if I have to show this to you from here, in the backups, if I click this, as you can see, the point in time, you can get 7 days, but my long-term retentions, they're all empty. So that's all you get. Now, I'm setting up, I'm saying keep my weeklies for 12 weeks. My yearly retention is 5 year. And what's a yearly backup, right? Again, as I said, the 16th backup of the 16th week's backup, keep that for 5 years. You can also do this all from the GUI if you want to, you can do it from the portal if you want to, but I'm also, you can also take these scripts and you can use those. And if you automate some of this stuff that, you have a standard retention, the way I do it, we have a standard retention for production database. We have Azure function. Every time it, every day it goes and says, hey, I have a new database, it will automatically set this up for us because we have a consistent policy for all our production ones. So you can take this and put it into a function, and that will do it for you. So now, if we go to the portal and refresh, as you can see here, I have now the weekly retention for 12 and the 16th week for 5 years, right? And you can also see it from here. If you want to see your weekly retention, or if you want to have some checks like Azure policies and stuff, you can use this code. It can go and interrogate and check, once a week or whatever you want. And then if it's not compliant, you can run the other script to make it compliant. If you ever want to remove your long-term retention, this is a script. I'm not going to run this for now, but I just provided it in case if you need this. So we talked about built-in HADR, right? As I said, if I go to my dashboard, as you see that, these are the only things I have. And now if I go to my primary database, if I go to my geo replication, as you will see, I haven't set up anything. It's empty, right? Nothing is there. So let's see what happened, right? So this is a tool. I put a URL. If you do not know what's OSHS, there's a URL here. Look this up. I use this all the time for different reasons. So you're going to, if you look at this code, pretty simple. I'm just doing a select count, right, from one of the tables. That's all I'm doing, and it's going to keep doing it for 50,000 times. I'm connecting to, one of the primary server that you saw, Azure SQL. This is the database name, right? Now, I didn't want to hard code my password, so now as you can see, the select is going on, right? And I'm going to mimic a failover here. Microsoft lets you do this only every 15 minutes, I believe, if you want to test it. If you keep doing it frequently, you'll get an error message because they don't want people just swapping for nothing. But if you want to do this for test purpose, you can do it, I think, once every 15 minutes. So now I'm also getting the time just to show you how much time it's getting, but this is the main command. I'm saying a failover. And as you see, I do not have any target because I didn't set up anything else. I'm just saying, I'm just trying to see if Microsoft has a problem with this in particular compute, what they're going to do. So we're just trying to mimic that, right? So now I issued a failover. As you can see, I'm getting timeout, right? And I'm not going to do anything else. I'm just going to wait. And you will see that it will automatically connect, and my select statements, will get result back. And this is a general tier, so it's going to take a little bit longer compared to business critical. So in my test, it takes about 30 plus seconds. As you can see now, we get it back, right, without doing anything. And if we look at the output, it get connected, but I still didn't get the result back, right? So it's still okay, 46 seconds. As you can see here, total seconds. I don't know why it got to the next line. It's 46 seconds. Now, I'm not going to run the second one, but I have the code for all of you. The second one is a business critical tier, pretty much doing the same thing. You will see this one will be recovering in my test probably about 15 seconds. So it's pretty much 1/3 because you're paying for more sophisticated hardware, and plus you have your compute, and your disks are already attached to each compute, so you do not have to reconnect to your storage and do those stuff. So I'm not going to bore you with this, but if you want to try this out, the code is here. You can run that by yourself. So the next one we talked about active geo replication, right? So now what I want to do is I want to set up active geo replication for this database. And so the question some of you might be asking that what region I choose, right? You can choose any region you want, but Microsoft do have recommendation about pairs. So look it up. So like for East US 2, Microsoft's recommendation is to use Central US as a region. So if you can, guided by that, that'll be probably a good idea, a better idea, unless you have a very strong reason that you cannot comply with that, or you cannot accommodate that. So let's close this. Here I'm giving it, what's my secondary server name. I do not have any database in the secondary. It will create the database by itself, so it will do some seeding. I only give it the server name right here. And as soon as we do that, It's going to take some time. Now, if we come here, we go back again. As you can see here, we didn't see this before, right? Now it has the server, it got the database, it's doing it initial seeding. Right? So it's replicating the whole database to the central US, that server name that I gave. And then once that is done, with Active Geo Replication, there is no automatic failover. Microsoft is not going to fail you over for you if you're just using Active Geo Replication. So you have to, your operations team or DevOps, whatever team, DBAs, you have to manage your failover. You decide when you want to failover. So this is the code for failing over. Once that's done, then I'll show you a failover. And you also have to manage your connection strings because now you are pointing to a different server. So, okay, so it's ready now. It's readable. It's done. It got catch up, percent complete, 100%. And if we initiate a failover, so now we see here the secondary is in central US. And this is the primary. It will switch the role once this command finishes. So if you have any question, you can put in the chat. These are a good time because I know there's some pause, which is the last thing you want in a virtual meeting, right? Because if you are face to face, you can talk about something else. But I thought, just showing you the slide is probably not a good idea. So I really want to show you how this thing works. So now, as you can see, the central US is our primary. The name is kind of confusing because it's a demo purpose, and the East US2 took the role of the readable, right? So it did fail over between the two regions. I'm going to fail back just for the next demo. With failover groups, so as I said, on a Active Geo Replication is part database, right? So even in the cloud, when you go from your portal, you always go from the database pane. But when you do failover groups, it at a server level because you can have multiple databases within a failover group, right? So the way you do it, you first create a failover group, and it can be empty. That can be nothing. You establish your failover group, then you can put database inside the failover group, or you can, you can remove it from the failover group if you want to. So let's go back here. And let's go to the failover group, right? We do not have anything right at this point. So let's create one. And as you see, this is the setting I was talking to you. Grace period with data loss hours, I set it to 2. The minimum you can set to 1. You can also decide to not do automatic failover, and you can set it to manual failover. So if you have a good ops team, 24/7 monitoring, you probably, you can argue in either way, right? You can set this up, but you can always decide to failover earlier. You don't want to wait for that whole period. So now we created a failover group. If we come here and refresh it, as you can see, I have a failover group, right? But I do not have any database. All it's saying that I have one database that can join in this group, but it's 0 right now. I didn't do anything, and my grace period is 120 minutes. Now we are adding the database into the failover group. And once we add the database, we'll get those 2 endpoints that I told you before. And those are the endpoints you should copy from here, and you should send it, whoever is setting up your app servers, right? So to take an example, let's take this. I copied this, and do a new query, connect. If we go to this database, right? So this is our primary. We do a server name. Because see, this is a primary server 1004, right? But in our connection string, we didn't have the server name. We just said failover group 1004 database.windows.net. Now, if we take this and do the same, we'll get the server name from the secondary. So I can change connection, check this out, connect. As you can see, it's the secondary, right? So you can take this and use those. Now, I know I set this up, as I said before, I set this up for auto failover, but if I decided, I cannot wait for 2 hours and I want to do a manual failover, I can do that with this command. So I also have that option. I do not have to depend on the Microsoft engineers to do the failover. Normally, Microsoft will only do this if they have a, like a bigger issues across the board, right? But otherwise, they will try to triage this without failing over, hundreds and thousands of customers. That's like their last option. So if they have to do that, that means it's pretty bad from their side. So go here. As you can see now, the secondary server took the role of the primary, and I don't know if it's too small. And the primary server name, it took the role of the secondary. Again, if you are using this in your connection string, you do not have to make any changes. It will automatically redirect you to the right one. So I talked about read scale out, right? A few times. I said that you automatically get, you can send your traffic to the nodes that you get for free for your read-only traffic. So to show that, so I have this read scale server, just the name, I named it. And as you can see, I have a database named SQL database read scale 1004, right? And if I go to Geo Replication, I do not have anything. I did not configure anything. And just to make it clear, even if I go to the server, if I go to the failover groups, I did not do anything, right? I didn't want to use SSMS, but this one is a lot easier. Otherwise, every time I try to use the Azure Data Studio, I get some issues there. So this is a standard, let me first make sure that I show you. So I'm pointing actually to that Azure SQL Server, right? Read scale out server, you see at the bottom, and I'm reading this database, right? All I'm saying, there's a property that you can look up. That is my database ready for read write, or it's in a read only mode, right? So in this case, it's a read write, but I'm still pointing to the same server name right here, same database. The thing that I did in my connection string, I'm sure if you're not familiar with this, you probably know this. This is saying this connection string is being used exclusively for read traffic, right? I'm only going to read. In that case, it will actually send the traffic to a different server. And as you see, this is sending to a read-only node. And with certain tiers, you do not pay anything extra, you get this by default. So you're not spending any extra money for that. Just so you know that. So if if they have traffic, because you're already paying for it, you might just send some traffic there and save some money on your compute. So I think that's all I have for demo. So I'm going to go back to the slide for a minute. Anyone have any question? I don't know if you're allowed to, come off the mute or whatever, folks want to.
Yeah, people can come off mute and they can ask questions.
Yeah, I'm just going to show my context one more time in case if anyone wants to, take a note. Later on, reach out with any questions, comments, and yeah. So I have all the time. So folks, if you have time, anything that I was not clear, maybe I went too fast, feel free to ask me. So, and I use all these extensively at my work. So someone raised their hand. I don't know if you have to unmute them or.
Go ahead, Karen. You can ask.
Yeah, hi. This is the great presentation. Thank you. I just got like one scenario that I would like to share that I experienced. So on the restore process, is this the right time, or can I could wait as well?
No, go ahead, Karen.
Okay, sure. So we had the scenario. I think we need to restore the database in production. And also we have like an Azure tagging policy that we enforce. So when we try to restore directly from the portal, it was failing because of the tagging policy. The error doesn't give any detailed message, but it clearly says like it's due to the tagging policy. So we disable the policy for time being because of the time crunch. And then after we researched after the restore, the database was restored without any tags. So the restored database did not have any tags. So we ended up creating those manually. For the research, I think directly from the portal or PowerShell, we cannot restore the tags, but using the CLI, you could specify what are all the tags that you would like to restore as part of the restore process. So just want to share if anybody will run into this. So just want to share the experience.
Yeah, I don't know off my head, but it's a good comment because, policies, you have to be careful, right? Policies you can set up in different ways, right? One is stop you from doing something, or you can say, let me do it, but, flag it in the next, whenever you send email. So, and I really don't know off my head, like you said, if I restore a database, I can quickly check this. If he's going, I don't think he's going to restore tags. I think you have to tackle that in a different way. But it's a good observation because you probably had a strict policy that you cannot have a database without. So how do you? I don't know. Anyway, but yeah, it's good to know. And CLI, a lot of things. Even today, I find that what you just said that I cannot do it with PowerShell. I cannot do from the portal, but I can do it from CLI. One example is the billing things. Right, they are absolutely, if you're using like reserve instance and other, I know I'm going a little bit off topic. If you want to look at if your RIs are being used, what RIs are not being used, if a VM is using RI, absolutely like CLI is your friend. Right? It has definitely more capability. But this is a good point. I haven't thought about this, but I'll probably do some tests after what you said. So thanks for sharing that.
Karthik, you want to talk about something?
Yes.
Go ahead.
You also mentioned that we can have backups beyond 35 days. How can we configure them? In the UI, I don't see that.
Okay. If you're seeing my screen, hopefully you're seeing my screen. I'll show you right now. So if I go to my primary server, I go to the backups. I only have one database, right?
Yes.
And I go to my retention. I already have it, right? Because I did it. So now I don't like it. Configure policies. See this? I can do anything. So this is my weekly. This is my monthly. And this is my yearly. And you can go up to 10 years. Does that answer your question or no?
Yes. What is the minimum? What kind of database we need to have? Means any standard database should have all these options?
If you're in basic tier, you do not get this slider. So this is point in time. You can go up to 35 days, except basic tier. Long-term retention is available in every tier because you are paying for it. Microsoft loves it if you set this up.
Thank you.
And if you download the notebook that I provided, it has all the code for you to check, set up, and remove it also. And if you have a bigger shop, you probably want to, someone was, the gentleman before you was talking about policy, you probably want to enforce this with a policy or a function, right? So it will go and do it automatically and check and let you know because, so in case if you have an audit or something, you don't want to look like you don't know, what you're doing, or, it's better to do a periodical check. My company, what process do you suggest for change control and management for infrastructure code? For example, ARM templates managed in and deployed by ADO. So Azure DevOps with Git or what change control and management. So it's, so some, in the chat, the question is, what process do you suggest for change control and management, right? Very broad question, right? You can always, you should have the right people to approve your pull request. And also in the pipeline, you can restrict, right, who can deploy. Is it automatic deploy? Is it once a week, once a day? What time of the day? And who can put the final push button? And again, like change control, like different companies, right? We I work for financial industry, so we have pretty strict. We do have also emergency change control, but those exceptions has to at least 2 people and who can approve it and all that. So I don't know if if I'm I'm answering your question or not. But for development, we try to be as flexible as possible because we do not want to slow down deployment and testing and all that. But when it goes to production, then definitely we use we have something called a ServiceNow. It's a third-party product. We use that for all our change control management. And then we have dedicated, release team. They will, you stage everything and they will push the button. So plus we are also doing a lot of stuff nowadays with the account. We are permissioning the accounts in such a way that we're trying to isolate, right? Different deployment accounts can only go to different subscription or different resource groups and what those can do. So there, I don't know. I do not have like a one-liner answer for you. So it's like multiple things we are putting together. So.
And if you are talking, Scott, about deploying your Azure infrastructure, which might include databases as well, you can certainly use ARM templates and you can use any of the Azure DevOps built-in tasks. You can utilize Terraform or any other third-party tools as well if you wished for.
Yeah, I mean, putting your infrastructure code into the deployment is a, I can give you an example, right? Someone in my place, there was an incident that someone deleted some ID account and we lost a couple of things and just took us less than 30 minutes, just deploy the whole thing again. It was in source control. We had the pipeline ready, just deploy it again. So, what Scott is saying is absolutely up. So, but again, the controls is a tricky thing, right? You don't want to slow down people. You don't have to wait for people to get approval. You need the, you have to have those like in emergency who can do it if that person is not available. People need to have the right permission to get into the code and and push the button. So.
All right. If anyone else has any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and you can ask Taiob now. Otherwise, I think we are done. Thank you so much, Taiob, for uh, presenting today. I guess this was a great topic and a great presentation. I think everyone would have learned something. Uh, so with that, I'll go ahead and stop the recording unless you have anything else to add.
No, thank you. I'll send you the link of my GitHub repo. Folks, please download, play with it, and reach out to me if you have any question. Sometimes I don't know the answer. I'll be honest with you, but your question gives me a chance to learn. I know folks that I can get answer from, and I can get back to you. So it shouldn't end here unless you're learning anything. It's really not a good use of my time and your time. So please let me know if I can help in any way.
Can you post that link to your GitHub repo in the chat? Probably.
Yeah, I can do that now. Yeah, that'll be nice. Yeah, thank you, actually.
And thanks once again. I'll go ahead and stop the recording now.
Sure.